effort to not just criminalize Bitcoin.
The US government is about to declare war on Bitcoin, and 99% of holders have no idea. A new bipartisan bill just dropped, and it's not just about stopping terrorists. It's a Trojan horse to kill financial freedom, because if they can ban Bitcoin mixers today, they'll come for your wallet tomorrow. Stick around, because this isn't speculation. It's already happening.
Financial privacy, but how that effort directly coincides with efforts to undermine free speech and the right to privacy in general. While many of these efforts are taking place at the international level, they intimately involve powerful American federal agencies, American commercial banks, and the Federal Reserve. Late last month, a bipartisan group of U.S. senators introduced the Financial Technology Protection Act, which would, quote, create a working group tasked with studying how terrorists or other criminals might use cryptocurrencies and other financial technologies and create proposals for Congress and regulatory agencies aimed at countering these uses, end quote. This working group would be composed of representatives of the U.S. Treasury Department, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN, the IRS, the Office of Foreign Asset Control, the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Agency, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, the Department of State, and the CIA. Bitcoiners should pay close attention to these developments, as the DOJ in particular has attempted to paint Bitcoin as the payment of choice for well-known terror groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, signaling that this working group proposed by this bill will likely seek to specifically target Bitcoin. Adding to this concern is the fact that a slew of recent mainstream media reports, which cite Treasury and FinCEN officials, DOJ officials, and CIA analysts, have claimed that, quote, terrorists are turning to Bitcoin and they're learning fast. That Bitcoin is the, quote, new frontier in terror financing. And that, quote, Bitcoin is helping terrorists secretly fund their deadly attacks. Even the prominent military think tank RAND Corporation has argued that Bitcoin and the dark web are the newest terrorist threat. Many of these entities, particularly the U.S. Department of Justice, are also currently helping draft the UN's new Cybercrime Treaty, showing that there is currently a very global effort to stomp out cybercrime and alleged funding sources for cybercriminals. However, much like the words terror and terrorist after 9/11, the terms cybercrime and cybercriminals are often very vaguely defined by these same authorities. Perhaps unsurprisingly, many of the groups looking to allegedly combat cybercrime in the US and beyond, including the Department of Justice and the FBI, are part of an international public-private partnership housed within the World Economic Forum that is seeking to define these terms in unsettling ways.
Here's what they're not telling you. This war on cybercrime isn't about crime at all. It's about control. The World Economic Forum's new task force, packed with FBI, CIA, and Bank of America, is quietly redefining cybercrime to mean using Bitcoin privately. Think that's paranoid? They've already seized 9 crypto exchanges this month, and their next target, anyone who values financial privacy.
Not only that, but this group and its partner organizations are also seeking policy objectives that, if widely implemented, would treat anonymous cryptocurrency transactions, and specifically Bitcoin transactions involving mixers and related privacy tools, as criminal. They also, without evidence, assert that there is a direct link between an increase in the value of cryptocurrencies, specifically Bitcoin, and an increase in cybercriminal activity. This public-private partnership, the WEF Partnership Against Cybercrime, or Westpac, is run by a former intelligence agent named Tal Goldstein, whose military intelligence career, was marked by his efforts to have intelligence agencies essentially fuse with private technology companies in his native Israel. Today, Westpac's members not only include the FBI, the Department of Justice, the U.S. Secret Service, and intelligence agencies of Israel and Britain, they also include massive too-big-to-fail banks like Bank of America and Santander, as well as massive tech companies like Amazon and Microsoft. PayPal is also there, so is the nonprofit that manages the SWIFT payment system. In recent reports, Westpac has alleged that there is a connection between the use of cryptocurrencies as well as privacy-enhancing tools such as mixers and the incidence of cybercrime. They argue that, quote, cybercriminals abuse encryption, cryptocurrencies, anonymity services, and other technologies, but fail to note that their use is hardly exclusive to criminals. Though they refrain from naming any currency specifically, the WEF has stated elsewhere on its website that, quote, governments don't like the fact that Bitcoin users are anonymous, and they have concerns over its use for criminal activity and money laundering, adding that their worries aren't unfounded. It's important to point out that Westpac doesn't see cybercriminals just as those who may engage in hacks or financially motivated acts like ransomware attacks. To Westpac, cybercriminals also include those who use technologies to uphold terrorism and spread disinformation to destabilize governments and democracies. From that, it seems that Westpac's inclusion of disinformation as a type of cybercrime betrays an intention to develop policies that, under the guise of combating cybercrime, will instead promote increased online censorship, particularly of independent media. In discussing solutions, Westpac calls for the global targeting of infrastructures and assets deemed to facilitate cybercrime, including those which enable cybercriminal revenue streams, which, as we will see shortly, refers to infrastructure that allows for more private cryptocurrency transactions and enables, quote, the promotion of illegal sites and the hosting of criminal content. In another section, the group discusses seizing the websites of cybercriminals as an attractive possibility. Given that Westpac and its members, like the FBI, view disinformation as a form of cybercrime, this could potentially see independent media websites and the infrastructure that allows them to operate and finance their work, like video sharing and payment platforms that do not censor, emerge as targets. Earlier this month, the FBI, in coordination with the National Police of Ukraine, did just this, seizing 9 crypto exchanges, the majority of which had Bitcoin or BTC in the domain name. Their crime? Offering, quote, anonymous cryptocurrency exchange services to website visitors.
Let's be clear, the FBI isn't shutting down these exchanges because of crime. They're doing it because Bitcoin threatens their monopoly. Remember, only 0.34% of crypto transactions are illegal. But here's the real kicker. This is all a setup for CBDCs. Central banks need Bitcoin to fail so they can force their surveillable digital dollar on you. And if you think they'll stop at mixers, you haven't been paying attention.
Westpac further argues that, quote, in order to reduce the global impact of cybercrime and to systematically restrain cybercriminals, cybercrime must be confronted at its source by raising the cost of conducting cybercrimes, cutting the activity's profitability, and deterring criminals by increasing the direct risk they face. It then argues, unsurprisingly, that because the cybercrime threat is global in scope, its solution must also be a globally coordinated effort. They say that the main way to achieve this involves, quote, harnessing the private sector to work side by side with law enforcement officials. Shockingly, Westpac calls for this cooperation to take place even if it is not, quote, always aligned with existing legislative and operational frameworks. In other words, they are saying this cooperation should be allowed to take place even if it is illegal. So how exactly do the members of Westpac plan on confronting cybercrime at its source? While they are tight-lipped on exact measures, another group they work closely with and that has considerable overlap with Westpac has some ideas. The Financial Services Information Sharing and Analysis Center, or ISAC, officially exists to, quote, help ensure the resilience and continuity of the global financial services infrastructure and individual firms against acts that could significantly impact the sector's ability to provide services critical to the orderly function of the global economy. In other words, ISAC allows the private financial services industry to decide on and coordinate sector-wide responses regarding how financial services are provided during and after a given crisis, including a cyber attack or sector-wide concern over cybercrime. ISAC was tellingly created in 1999, the same year that Glass-Steagall was repealed. ISAC, their members include the biggest firms on Wall Street. Citigroup, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Morgan Stanley are among its members, and much of their leadership contributes to, works for, or chairs committees and initiatives of the World Economic Forum, including those focused on cybercrime and ransomware. In 2021, ISAC's Global Intelligence Office released several predictions for 2021 and beyond. Most of these predictions express concern about a coming cyber calamity, though one prediction in particular stands out, that, quote, economic drivers towards cybercrime will increase. ISAC claims that the current economic situation created in the wake of COVID-related lockdowns will, quote, make cybercrime an ever more attractive alternative, stating immediately afterwards that, quote, dramatic increases in cryptocurrency valuation will drive threat actors to conduct campaigns capitalizing on this market, including extortion campaigns against financial institutions and their customers. In other words, ISAC views the increase in the value of cryptocurrency as a direct driver of cybercrime, particularly for ransomware incidents, implying that the value of cryptocurrency must be dealt with if there is to be a reduction in cybercrime, and if cybercrime is to be truly confronted at its source by attacking its profitability, as Westpac suggests. However, the data does not fit these assertions, as the use of cryptocurrency by cybercriminals is low and is getting lower. For instance, one recent study, ironically produced by Westpac member Chainalysis, found that only 0.34% of cryptocurrency transactions in 2020 were tied to criminal activity, down from 2% the year prior. Though the decrease may be due to a jump in cryptocurrency adoption, the overall percentage of crime-linked cryptocurrency transactions is incredibly low, a fact obviously known to ISAC and its members. But what's disturbing here is that mainstream media has widely circulated the claim that Bitcoin specifically is, to quote Forbes, driving the 1.4 billion ransomware industry. Or to quote NPR, Bitcoin has fueled ransomware attacks. Or to quote an executive at Westpac member Chainalysis, Bitcoin is the favorite by far for ransomware attackers. I could give infinite examples, as there is truly an abundance of reports just like these that blame a jump in a well-publicized cybercrime events, specifically ransomware attacks, on Bitcoin's increasing popularity and its intrinsic value. Yet here, if the banks, intelligence agencies, and tech companies that partnered with these initiatives see not just financial privacy, but the value of Bitcoin itself as a threat, it goes without saying that their efforts to stop cybercrime at its source would not just involve eradicating financial privacy when it comes to crypto, but also working to devalue crypto. With such groups openly discussing working outside of legal frameworks to accomplish their goals, Bitcoiners must start paying closer attention to these shadowy groups. There is no proof that cryptocurrency, or more specifically Bitcoin, is the key driver of cybercrime, as cybercrime significantly predates the existence of both. However, cryptocurrency does present a threat to the plans of ISAC members and their partners to begin producing digital currencies controlled either by approved commercial banks or central banks themselves, digital currencies that are designed to be easily surveilled. Central bank digital currencies in particular are being designed and implemented to erode financial privacy and autonomy. The success of CBDCs and related projects depends on neutering the competition, which is likely why ISAC has called for the economic drivers of cybercrime to be combated by a global financial cyber utility, which is, of course, the very same globalist entity that Westpac seeks to create. Not long before ISAC and Westpac made all of these claims, many members of both groups participated in a 2020 initiative hosted by the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, itself a member of Westpac. The president of the endowment at the time was William Burns, who subsequently became Joe Biden's pick for CIA director less than a year later. The Carnegie Endowments Initiative brought together many members of Westpac and FS ISAC with an important addition: representatives of central banks, namely the U.S. Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank.